May I have your attention? Thank you very much. My name is Elise Body. I'm a professor of law at Rutgers Law School in Newark. I'm also a proud member of the ACS board. I joined ACS because I share its vision for promoting a society that is fair and inclusive and just, but that also promotes respect for the dignity and humanity of all people, right? Not just people of privilege and power. And with that, I am very pleased to introduce the former U.S. Attorney General and longtime friend, to ACS, Eric Holder. General Holder was a litigation partner at Covington and Burling. Covington in the house, I take it. He also served on the ACS Board of Directors from 2004 until 2009 when he left to become the 82nd Attorney General of the United States. In 1997, he was named by President Clinton to be the Deputy Attorney General. Before that, he served as U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia and was nominated by President Reagan to become an Associate Judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. When the history books are written, General Holder will not only be remembered, but he will be celebrated for his commitment to protecting the rights of vulnerable and disfranchised populations. As Attorney General, he fought to make good on the promises of our Constitution by seeking to ensure that all citizens have the right to participate in our democracy. When the Supreme Court gutted a major provision of the Voting Rights Act, the Department of Justice, under his strong and visionary leadership, fought back. When states passed discriminatory voting laws that exclude people from our American community, he fought back. He was also an eloquent and powerful voice on behalf of LGBT equality, when he announced in 2011 that the Department of Justice would no longer defend the Discriminatory Defense of Marriage Act. On criminal justice reform, he brought desperately needed national attention to the problem of over-incarceration, especially among people of color. He shined a light on police departments whose practices violated the civil rights of community members, and he strongly supported laws to reduce inequality in the criminal justice system. Now that he has left DOJ, we hope that he will get some rest, but we also hope to see much more of him. Please give a very warm welcome to our dear friend, Eric Holder. Where is he?
Very kind introduction. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Eric Holder, you the man!
I get the feeling I should stop now. I don't want to disappoint you, you know? But you're right, I am the man. At PS 127 in East Elmhurst in Queens, I was the man in that playground. Barack Obama, Hawaii. Don't anybody repeat that to the president. But thank you, Elise, for that very kind introduction. Thank you for that shout out. It's wonderful to be here among friends at the American Constitution Society. It's good to see that we have our Solicitor General here. He will go down in history as one of the great Solicitor Generals of all time. He is a good friend and a real progressive. ACS is an organization that I think has done much to improve the lives of our fellow citizens and done much to ensure that our nation continues to be guided by the spirit of our founding documents. Now, tonight, I would like to discuss with you an issue that I believe threatens the integrity of our great nation and puts in peril the future welfare of our country. This is something that our Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department has been fighting over the last few years. 50 years after the passage of the most significant civil rights legislation in our nation's history, that most basic of American rights, the right to vote, is under siege. At a time when we should be expanding opportunities to cast a ballot, there is a movement in America that attempts to make it more difficult. Abetted by a wrongly decided, factually inaccurate, and disconnected Supreme Court decision, too many in this country are trying too hard to make it too difficult for the people to express their views. Now, let me start with a basic statement upon which I think everybody can agree. Every person attempting to vote should have to show that he or she is who they claim to be. Too many today forget that this has always been the case, and that in the past our fellow citizens were allowed to demonstrate that in many credible ways. It has only been in the very recent past, and in certain states, with certain legislatures and certain governors, that a more restrictive, prescribed approach has been mandated. And the question from my perspective is why? Well, the usual justification stated is to ensure the integrity of the electoral system by preventing voter fraud. Now, given the nature of the fraud that is to be eliminated, the new restrictions must, I assume, be designed to prevent in-person false identification voting. Now, although there is no statistical proof that this is, in fact, an issue about which the nation should be concerned, the vote fraud mantra is said so often, it is almost said robotically, that some people have unthinkingly begun to believe that the issue is real. But studies have shown that the actual instance of in-person voter fraud is extremely rare. And this is very logical. The penalties associated with voter fraud, usually felonies, far outweigh the impact that an individual or group of people might affect. To truly impact an election would probably require substantial numbers of people somehow holding themselves out as voters that they are not, which would increase almost exponentially the exposure of the scheme. No such widespread schemes have been detected. The Brennan Center has stated, and I quote, that it is more likely that an individual will be struck by lightning than that he will impersonate another voter at the polls. I'm not sure where that comes. Yeah. And probably a lot less likely than winning the lottery, you know. People of good faith, people who are grounded in the facts, really have to ask where the problem is and have to concede that there simply isn't one. Well, if there's not a fact-based voter impersonation problem, what then could be the basis for the photo identification push? What? Well, sadly, one party has decided to lash itself to short-term political expediency and put itself on the wrong side of history. In a 2007 article in the Houston Chronicle, it quoted the political director of the Texas Republican Party and stated, and I quote, "Among Republicans, it is an article of religious faith that voter fraud is causing us to lose elections," he stated. He doesn't agree with that, but he does believe that requiring photo IDs could cause enough of a drop-off in legitimate Democratic voting to add 3% to the Republican vote, unquote. In Pennsylvania, in the last presidential election in 2012, the Republican State House Majority Leader listed a few partisan issues that would help Mitt Romney in the state. After listing and talking about guns and abortion, he said, and again I quote, "Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania, done," unquote. Finally, a federal court here in Washington, D.C., in throwing out a Texas Republican-supported voter identification law stated that it would, and again quote, impose strict, unforgiving burdens on the poor. And just as an aside, remember that Texas law said that a state university ID was found not to be adequate proof, but a state-issue concealed weapons permit was. Think about that. Let me be very frank. Faced with demographic changes that they perceived go against them, and saddled with a governing philosophy at odds with an evolving nation, some Republicans have decided that if you can't beat them, change the rules. Make it more difficult for those individuals least likely to support Republican candidates to vote. And this is done with the knowledge that by simply depressing the vote of certain groups, not even winning now, just by depressing the votes of certain groups, an election can be impacted. A 2014 study by the GAO found that more restrictive voter ID laws decreased the votes of young people, minorities, and the poor in Kansas and Tennessee in 2012. If one were to find vote fraud, that, in fact, is where it is. That is vote fraud. The nation's attention should not be focused on these phantom illegal voters. The Census Bureau reported that in the 2008 presidential election, of the 75 million adult citizens who did not vote, 60 million were not registered and therefore not eligible to cast a ballot. Now, that is one of the places where we should focus our efforts. Now, just to show you I'm not copying somebody else who said that, in a speech that I gave in 2011, at the LBJ Library, I called for the automatic registration of all eligible citizens. And I think that the logic of the arguments I made then is still sound. The ability to vote is a right. It is not a privilege. Under our current system, many voters must follow needlessly complex and cumbersome voter registration rules. And before and after every election season, state and local officials have to usually manually process a crush of new applications, most of them which are handwritten, leaving the system riddled with errors and too often creating chaos at the polls. Now, modern technology, I believe, provides a straightforward fix for these problems if we have the political will to bring our election systems into the 21st century. We must also address the fact that although 1 in 9 Americans moves every year, their voter registration does not move with them. Now, many would-be voters don't realize this until after they have missed the deadline for registering, which can fall sometimes a full month before Election Day. Election officials should work together to establish a program of permanent, portable registration so that voters who move can vote at their new polling place on Election Day. Now, until that happens, we should implement fail-safe procedures to correct voter roll errors and omissions by allowing every voter to cast a regular, non-provisional ballot on Election Day. Several states have already taken this step, and it's been shown to increase turnout by at least 3 to 5 percentage points. Now, these modernization effects will not only improve the integrity of our elections, they would also save precious taxpayer dollars. Now, despite these benefits, there will always be those who will say that easing registration hurdles and election day processes will only lead to voter fraud. Well, let me be very clear. Voter fraud, to the extent that it actually exists, is not acceptable and should not be tolerated. But as I learned early in my career as a prosecutor in the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section, where I actually investigated and prosecuted real voting fraud cases, making voter registration and voting easier are simply not likely by themselves to make our elections more susceptible to fraud. Indeed, those on all sides of this so-called debate have essentially acknowledged that in-person voting fraud is uncommon. We must be honest about this, and we must recognize that our ability to ensure the strength and the integrity of our election systems and to advance the reforms necessary to achieve this depends on whether the American people are informed, engaged, and willing to demand fact-based contentions and common sense solutions and regulations that make voting more accessible. Now, politicians may not readily and willingly alter the very systems under which they were elected. Only we, the people, can bring about meaningful change and alter current discriminatory trends. So I urge you all to speak out, to raise awareness about what is at stake. Call on the political party most responsible to resist the temptation to suppress certain votes in the hope of attaining electoral success, and instead work to achieve this success by appealing to more voters. What do they fear? What do they fear? The very people who they claim they want to represent? Urge policymakers at every level to reevaluate our election systems and to reform them in ways that encourage, not limit, participation. Insist that they make it easier to register and easier to vote. And ask this essential question: why is voting tied to a single Tuesday in November? Work to expand voting days and hours so that many of our fellow citizens need not choose between casting a ballot and keeping their jobs. Today, we cannot and we must not take the right to vote for granted, nor can we shirk the sacred responsibility that falls upon our shoulders. Throughout his presidency, Lyndon Johnson, who made the promise of the 1965 Voting Rights Act real, frequently pointed out, and I quote, "America was the first nation in the history of the world to be founded with a purpose, to right wrong and to do justice," unquote. Over the last 2 centuries, the fulfillment of this purpose has taken many forms: acts of protest and compassion, declarations of war and peace, and a range of efforts to make certain that, as another great president said, government of, by, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. Today, there are competing visions about how our government should move forward. That's what the democratic process is all about: creating space for thoughtful debate, creating opportunities for citizens to vote their opinions, and ultimately letting the people chart their own course. Our nation has worked and even fought to help people around the world establish such a process. Here at home, honoring our democracy demands that we remove any and all partisan barriers to voting, a goal that all American citizens of all political backgrounds must share. Now, despite so many decades of struggle, sacrifice, and achievement, we must remain ever vigilant in safeguarding our most basic and important right. Too many recent acts and actions, I think, are simply shameful and have the potential to reverse the progress that defines us and that has made this nation exceptional, as well as an example for all the world. We must be true to the arc of America's history, which compels us to be more inclusive with regard to the franchise. And we must never forget the purpose that more than 2 centuries ago inspired our nation's founding and now must guide us forward. So let us act with optimism and also without delay. Let us rise to the challenges and overcome the divisions and the fallacies of our time. Let us signal to the world that in America today, the pursuit of a more perfect union lives on. Be not afraid. Be not afraid. Now is not the time to retreat in the face of a partisan assault on the most basic of American rights. The battle to ensure the voting rights of all Americans is a defining one. If we are to be the nation we claim to be, we must challenge in every way possible those who would undermine our democracy and who have lost faith with the covenant between the government and the people. Now, I am confident that with a focused citizenry and with citizens and leaders like those in this room today, this struggle for right, and it is a struggle simply for right, this struggle will be won. If we are to remain true to those who sacrificed and who died to ensure the right to vote, we must not fail. Thank you.
Thank you, General Holder. Thank you, General Holder, for your thoughtful and inspirational comments. You have made it clear that voter ID laws are a solution in search of a problem. And your proposal of universal registration of all citizens is an exciting goal for all of us to pursue. And thank you for your ongoing commitment to the work of ACS. My name is David Brodsky. I have the honor of chairing the board of this amazing organization. We have an outstanding 2 days ahead, and if they're anything like the incredible start to our convention with such inspiring speakers this evening, then we are in for an important and inspiring event. As General Holder has made clear, we live in troubled times with difficult issues facing our nation and with no easy answers for these issues. For example, notwithstanding the seemingly naive hope of some in our constitutional government that if we just don't talk about racism, it would cease to be a problem, we know it and many related issues still are with us 24/7. But with friends such as General Holder and our honored recipient of the David Carliner Award and all of you in this room, ACS will continue to play a growing and valuable role in shaping the debate of these pressing legal concerns of our day and of our future. And our future is sitting mostly back there. And thank you for everything you're going to be doing to help all of us. Our expanding network and growing reach are due in large part to your support and involvement. I want to tell you how much we appreciate and need the generous support of law firms, unions, companies, and nonprofits, as well as individuals for making tonight's dinner and the entire convention possible. You will see these sponsors in our convention program, and Caroline listed them for you in her introductory comments. And you'll see them in signage behind me probably, or certainly around me. And these are the people and the groups who have chosen to actively make real difference and lasting difference by supporting this organization. If you see people you know from these groups, please stop. Please introduce yourself and thank them. It makes a difference to acknowledge their help. Beyond this wonderful convention, however, ACS has a continuing need throughout the year for support of our programming and the network that you've helped to build. I hope you will leave here tonight, and for those of you who can't be here the next 2 days, those of you who leave here tonight and those of you who can stay for the next 2 days, leave here on Saturday, you'll take some time to pledge some support for the work that we have in front of us. We'll make that easy for you. I'm not going to give you a hashtag. I'm going to give you a website. Please visit acslaw.org/give, or visit the kind folks at the registration tables outside who will be happy to help. We get started tomorrow at 9 o'clock sharp with a plenary panel discussion in this ballroom and featuring remarks from a congressman I love hearing speak, Hakeem Jeffries. I know you'll be uplifted by him, as I always am. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the morning. Good night.